Samma Sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa.
Good. Very good afternoon, everyone. Sorry about this kind of turbulent beginning of the session today. I was already there trying to open the Zoom, but it didn't work. So let me check that the internet okay. Internet. It is going well. This is a new house, as you can see. And this is another room, so I need to check that everything works well. Good, so today we officially we will officially begin with our syllabus. And as we were saying last day, we're going to do approximately 1 hour of grammar, discussing the case syntax, that is the sambandha, or how we use a specific case for a specific function. That is how we use a specific vibhakti for a specific karaka. So this is basically what this beginning of the semester is going to be about. Separating form and function. One thing is the form, the other is the function. The form is the vibhakti. For instance, if I have the word dhammo, the form is a nominative, that is a pratama vibhakti. That is the form, right? It has the same form. But if I say dhammo, what is the karaka of dhammo? I just say Dhammo, what is the karaka?
Lingata.
Again?
Lingata.
Tata? Everyone agree?
Lingata. Linga.
Lingata. Okay, yes. Lingata is not a karaka. A karaka should be something related to a verb. But of course, the nominative is lingata. That is a correct answer. It lingata literally means the expressing the meaning. Expressing the meaning, but there is more to that. So if I'm asking about what is the karaka of Dhammo, if karaka can be katta, karana, okasa, sampadana, apadana. Which one is that? Or kamma? So what is the karaka of both? Dhammo.
Katukaraka.
Katukaraka. Everyone agrees?
But I would say there should be a verb. Without having verb, sometimes we confuse with the karaka. We should have
exactly.
a verb.
If I say Dhammo Bhagavata Desito, then what is the karaka of Dhammo?
Kamma karaka.
Kamma karaka. Very good. So that you know very. Well, that's the difference between form and function. The form is something that we can see in the word itself. The function, it's not something that we can see in the word itself. We can only see the function in relationship. That's why the case syntax in Pali is called sambandha. Sambandha means relationship. I'm going to silence everyone, not because I don't want to hear your voice, but because sometimes there is feedback. But please feel free to turn on the microphone. Right, so what we're going to do, as I was saying, we begin with a summary of case syntax based on the book that you may have started reading. Did you start reading the book? I'm going to show you which book I mean, because we shared it last day, but just to be on the safe side, let me open the file. Some students find this book a little bit difficult, so I don't know how you feel about this. So this is the book. Yeah, Syntax of the Cases by O.H.D.A. Vijayasekara, otherwise known as Vijayasekara. Syntax of the Cases in the Pali Nikayas. That is actually an old book. That's an old book because that is based on the PhD dissertation from 1936. So it's going to be almost 100 years very soon, or not so soon. It's 90 years already. And so we started with nominative and accusative and so on. There are all these cases. The terminology is very much Western style. Especially 20th century Western style. So I don't know if you started reading this book. How did you know the book already, or is it new?
Yes, I have used it while I was doing BA in ITBMU. But the thing is, it's very difficult English. That's
is it
common English?
One thing is that the English is a little bit outdated, but it's also that it's this kind of academic jargon that is already a little bit old-fashioned. So I don't know. Maybe if we start with the nominative, we will already see some examples of it. Nominal themes. Well, it starts with a reflection. This I recommend reading, but it's not strictly necessary. If you read the entire book, that is always better. And then if we go to the nominative. This introduction is quite interesting, actually. Although some things have been kind of disputed. But it's interesting. Nevertheless, he has very interesting ideas. And then today we start from here, the nominative case. And you will see that my summary is very much based on these paragraphs. This symbol here, this is used when you are writing if you write a book, or even sometimes when you write an essay, it's good for referencing. It means a paragraph. And there is one advantage of structuring the book or the article, or is usually a book, especially a reference book. If you write a manual, like an introduction to Pali or introduction to the Nikaya, anything that is a kind of academic book, it's good to write it in terms of paragraphs. Yeah, this symbol here is a paragraph, this small thing here, that's called a paragraph. But it's a kind of small topic, like small paragraphs, units, small units. And there is one advantage of numbering the text in this way, because you know that nowadays when we reference a book, we usually say year, so the name or the surname of the author, year, and then page number. So for instance, we can say, I don't know, Norman, 1988, 75. That means Norman, the publication of 1988, then colon, and then page 85. This is a very standard way of referencing today. But what happens with this referencing in terms of page number is that if you are writing a book that is a kind of reference book like this one, suppose you are publishing a second edition, and in the second edition you change some things and you add more things. So in that case, the page numbers are going to change, and one edition will be different from the other in terms of page numbers, but it's probably not going to be different in terms of paragraphs. Yeah. So let me see. Okay. So these are the paragraphs, and I'm going to select the most important functions according to the paragraph. So here we start with the nominative of subject, and let's read a little bit just to feel the taste of the book, and then we move to my notes. The nominative of the first case, Pratama Vibhakti, Sanskrit Pratama Vibhakti, as in the older languages, is mainly used to express the subject of the simple sentence with the verb in the active voice. So that's very simple. That's the nominative. It expresses the subject. Here, the word subject actually means the grammatical subject. It also means the logical agent. It's the agent of the verb. But here he calls it the subject. Indian grammar has no term to denote the subject of the active verb or grammatical subject. So this is the grammatical subject. The term kartru, that means katta, signifies only the agent of or the logical subject. The logical connection between the subject and the main verb varies according to the nature of the latter. With the transitive verb, the subject denoted by the nominative case is the virtual doer of the action, of the kriya, that is the verb, whose influence is exercised on some object. For instance, say yatava pana udai puriso asim kosya pabbaheya, and that means as if a man udai were to draw out his sword from the sheath. And so here asim is the object and puriso is the agent of the action pabbaheya. A man would draw out the asim, the asi, the sword, kosya, from the sheath. Yeah, from the sheath. Or Bhagava Dhammam Deseti, that is very, very simple one. Here Bhagava is nominative, that we call it the nominative, that is the subject, but it's not just the subject, it's the agent. It's the agent of the sentence. Yeah, the Blessed One preaches the Dhamma. Great. So you say that you have found the English of this book a little bit difficult. How many of you find the English difficult? And could you give an example of this? Some sentence or some page that is not so clear? Venerable Siddhartha? Or is it just a kind of feeling that the book is not so I don't know how to say. It's not so clear. It's not an English that is so clear in today's style, in terms of today's style. How do you feel about this?
That's what I maybe signal poor. Can you hear me?
Sure. Yeah.
How can I? The style actually. Not like normally when we read the Bhikkhu Bodhi's translations, it seems to be quite easy to access.
Right. That is true. Bhikkhu Bodhi is a contemporary writer, so we feel much closer to his English, and it's not just the English; it's also the style. In the case of Vijayasekara's book, that was basically a PhD thesis. And at that time, it was normal that a PhD thesis should be prepared for print right away, and it would usually be oriented or destined to an academic audience. But for instance, today, in the case of Bhikkhu Bodhi, he caters for a kind of very large audience, both monastic and non-monastic, both Buddhist and non-Buddhist. So it's not just academics, but it also includes academics. So it's a clear style. Still, I think it's a good exercise to try to use this book as much as we can. And it is your duty to go through the book. And my duty, so to say, will be to move on with the summary. So every day we will be doing a little bit of summary. Today, maybe we can cover nominative and accusative. I'm not so sure. But we will read a little bit, and then we will move to the sutta, the Brahmajala, and see what we can find that we have seen in the theory. So the final goal of this course is that in the final exam, there's going to be some questions about the theory that we see in the first part of the class. And also there's going to be, a passage from one text, or probably from the Digha Nikaya. And there will be some questions about, this accusative in this sentence. What kind of accusative is this? This compound in this sentence, what kind of compound is this? This taddita in this sentence, what kind of taddita is this? Or questions like this. So one part that will be more theoretical and one part will be more practical. Great. So let's start. We start with the nominative. Nominative is another way of saying patama. Yeah. And generally, as we say, as the book says, it's the subject of the clauses. A clause basically means a sentence. Yeah. But it's more than a sentence. It's the full sentence. What do I mean by that? If you have a sentence like Yokaroti Sakata. Yeah? Yokaroti Sakata. So we call it a sentence. But Yokaroti, this you can take it as a clause. It's the subordinate clause. And Sakata, you can take it as a main clause. So the clauses are kind of sentences taken independently. So even in a complex sentence, you can have particular clauses. Or in the word iti, for instance, if I say, aham gacchami iti vadati, iti so vadati. Aham gacchami iti so puriso vadati. So aham gacchami iti, this thing, you can call it a clause. Clause basically literally means something that is closed, something that is closed. Clause literally means closed. So you can take, in a complex sentence, you can cut it into small sentences. Each one of them is a clause. You can also have an absolutive clause, like gamam gantva bhojanam kadati. So gamam gantva, that is a clause, an absolutive clause. You can take it as an independent small sentence, yeah? So this is, in every clause, there is a subject, and you can express that with the nominative. So when the verb is transitive, that means sakammaka, you can have examples like Buddho dhammam deseti or Bhagava dhammam deseti, the Buddha teaches the Dhamma, or Sayatava panaudayi puriso asinko seapa baheya, as if a man udayi were to draw his sword from a sheath. if the verb is intransitive, you can still have the nominative playing the role of the subject. For instance, Tathagato loke uppajjati. The Tathagata arises in the world. So these two terms, transitive and intransitive, are very important. And I think you all know them because in Pali, transitive means sakammaka. Literally means a verb which takes an object, which does something. So whether it produces something, like kammam karoti, like literally, it produces an action, it makes an action, it does an action. Or if you say rukkam passati, the rukkam is also the kamma, although literally it's not something that is done, right? So if I say so puriso rukkam passati, that means that man sees a tree. And if I ask you what is rukkam, you will say that is a kamma. So what is puriso? That is katta. What is rukkam? You will say that is kamma. But kamma is in the sense of grammatical kamma. It's not an action that is done. So if the verb consists in doing an action, that is a kamma. But also if the verb consists of perceiving something, experiencing something, saying something, that is also called a kamma. Well, in the case of saying, it's obviously something that is done. But you get my point when you have verbs like seeing something, so reaching out to the object. Also verbs meaning to go, so reaching the goal, gamam gacchati. Gamam also would be called kamma here. That is the object. So a verb which takes kamma, which needs the kamma in order to complete its meaning, it's called sakammaka. And if it doesn't need the kamma, if it doesn't need the direct object in order to complete its meaning, it's called akammaka. So that's the word sakammaka and akammaka. I think these words are already well known to you. I'm not sure that you are familiar with transitive and intransitive. But these are words that you should know in English, transitive and intransitive. Yeah? That means sakammaka and akammaka. Sometimes the nominative, and this is a tricky thing, that is an interesting part of the approach of Vijay Sekara's book. He counts one type of nominative as the elliptic subject. What is the meaning of ellipsis? Elliptic, that means there is ellipsis. Anyone can tell me what is the meaning of elliptic? Elliptic means that it's not there, it's hidden. It's hidden. In Pali you would call it lopa. There is lopa, adasana, non-visibility. Right? So it's not visible. It's not, you don't see it in the sentence, but you understand it. And the example is this one. Adinnadanam pahaya, adinnadana pativirato hoti. So here we don't see who is this one who is pativirato. Yeah? It just means adinnadanam pahaya, having abandoned stealing or not taking what is not given. He, we know hoti means he is, hoti, one who abstains from stealing. He is pativirato adinnadana. He is one who abstains from, but we don't see who is this person. Does it mean anyone or that gentleman over there? We don't know. We just know that it's probably a man because this attribute is a masculine. This is pullinga. But we don't know anything else. It doesn't say so puriso adinnadanam pahaya. It doesn't say so puriso or so bhikkhu or whatever. So the subject is certainly, it has to be in the nominative. This is a nominative that is virtually, it's virtually there. But it's not visible. It's elliptic. Yeah, it's elliptic. So when we find a sentence like this one, you could say that here there is a nominative subject. There's a nominative subject, but in this case it's elliptic. In this case, if you say Buddho Dhammam Deseti, that the subject it's just a normal nominative subject. But suppose you don't have Buddho and you just say Dhammam Deseti, then that would be a case of nominative that is elliptic. Now, the nominative is also the subject of absolutives and verb. So, atako ayasma sariputto nivasetva pattachivaram adaya yena dananjanissa brahmanassa nivesanam tena upasankami. Upasankamitva panyate asane nisidi. So here what you can see is that the same nominative, ayasma sariputto, functions as the subject of nivasetva, adaya, upasankami, upasankamitva, and nisidi. So you have this sequence of absolutives, and at the end of a sequence, you may find a personal verb, a verb that in this case is the third person singular. Remember that in Pali we call it the first person, but in English we call it the third person. So the Patama Purisa in Pali, in English we call it the third, not the Patama, the third. The teaching here is that the subject of absolutives and the verb is usually the same. That is a trick that I teach to, and you probably also teach to beginner students. I don't know if you do that, but you know that an absolutive, it has no person. So if I see upasankami, here I know, well, this is second or third person. It means you or he or she. Yeah, it means you reached or you approached or he or she approached. Upasankami. But if I say nivasetva, you don't know if it's aham nivasetva, tuam nivasetva, so or sa nivasetva, mayam nivasetva, tumhe nivasetva, or te or ta, tayo nivasetva. We don't know. There is no person. So when we see the absolutive, there may be a doubt, namely, then who is the subject of this absolutive? And as you know, I'm sure very well, usually we have to read on. There's absolutive here, absolutive there, and then we reach the verb in the personal form. And this, because we have seen a nominative here, sariputto, and this is certainly a third person singular. So the same subject of the main verb is going to be the subject of the absolutives. Yeah. So it's sariputto nivasetva, sariputto adaya, and then sariputto upasankami. And we continue. Sariputto upasankamitva, sariputto nisidi. So it's all sariputta. And in English, like in Pali, we do the same. We just need to mention sariputta once. But this nominative is going to play the role. So nominative is the form, but the function is playing the role of subject in every single clause that we find in this sequence. Yeah. According to one of my Sanskrit teachers, this rule that the subject of the absolutive will be always the same subject as the main verb, this is not 100% true. It's not always true. But I think it's generally true, to the point that we can say that this is the norm, this is the rule, this is the general rule. So we can teach that to students, knowing that maybe occasionally, exceptionally, it doesn't work. But generally it has to work. That is what we should expect. Yeah. Still, this is a subject, it's a nominative subject. We haven't moved from the nominative subject. Yeah. You can see that these are all examples of subject. The nominative can be the subject. It can be the subject of transitive or intransitive. Sometimes it's subject, but it's elliptic. Sometimes it's subject, but it appears once. It is not elliptic, but it appears once, and it's the subject of a string of verbs. And then he said, the author said that there are exceptions to see. Now we can see an exception by contamination or doubtful readings. Now, I would like to know if you understand these concepts that are very important. Here, as you know, I think I'm always repeating the same idea, but at SSBU, when you come to SSBU, okay, we are going to learn Pali together. That's fine. But you already know Pali. One of the things that we are learning here is how to read secondary literature, how to do research in Pali, how to do research that is, let's say, of an international standard. And that means today basically reading in English. English is not my language. It's not your language, I think. You have Burmese or Sinhalese or Shan or whatever. My language is Catalan. But we use English as a standard. Even the author of this book was not an English speaker. although his English was probably really, really good at that time. In any way, there are concepts that we're going to find again and again. And sometimes there is a Pali equivalent. There is a Pali word for these cases. So the first one is the contamination. Contamination is maybe you've heard this concept in terms of ecology, contamination or pollution. It means pollution or contamination. Like if we say that a river is contaminated, it means that the river should carry only water, but someone is throwing some dirt from the, I don't know, from the farm. Maybe there's the excrement or the pesticide or something is contaminating. It's penetrating. It's mixing. It's a kind of mixing that is not good. A mixing that it's probably incorrect. Yeah, the contamination. So here let's see what he means by possible contamination. The first example, adasam ko aham ittim mulagabbam diswana me etad ahosi. I saw a woman suffering in delivery, and having seen her, it occurred to me. Yeah. So here, what happened is that, as you can see at the end, this one. What is the subject? What is the subject of ahosi here? The grammatical subject. Anyone could tell?
Etad.
So etad ahosi. Because how do we know that? Etad means this was, and if it was not just one thing, it were more things, and we would say etani, then it will be etani ahesum. But if it's only one, so the verb will change according to the subject. The subject and the verb, they always agree in number. So that's how we know that the subject of ahosi is etad. But here, what is the subject of this wana? It's not the subject of ahosi here. Actually, the subject of this one is aham. And that's because we have a sentence previously. And in the previous sentence, we have the verb adasam, which is first person singular. That's correct. So aham adasam, I saw ittim, or aham ittim adasam. And because of the contamination, the influence of this previous sentence, this absolutive that actually belongs to this sentence, it belongs to this one, but it still has the subject of the previous verb and not this one. So this kind of distortion in Pali, I think probably one name for this is a kind of vipallasa. It's a kind of vipallasa. We could call it vipallasa. It's a kind of sentence vipallasa. It's the wrong kind of directioning of a word. But this is an example. In practice, when we read that, the meaning is clear. Of course, it's me. I saw the woman, and having seen that woman, I thought this occurred to me. This was to me. But you can see that the rule that the subject of the main verb will be the same as the previous absolutive, that doesn't apply here. Yeah, it's an exception. And so that would be probably an example of contamination, quite clearly from the previous sentence. And then another one, Puna chaparam bhikkhave sappuriso upasampajya viharati panyaya cha asadiswa asava parikaya penti. Furthermore, monks, a good man having entered abides therein, and having seen with his insight, the cankers are destroyed. So again, here diswa has the subject still of that sappuriso, but the subject of parikayapenti is the asava, right? It's the cankers, what he translated as the cankers are destroyed. Parikayapenti, or are caused to be destroyed. They are destroyed. So in this case, this is probably an example of what he considers doubtful reading. I don't know exactly how, but maybe originally you could take this as a not as a third person plural, but third person singular. And this asava, maybe originally could be taken as an accusative, but we don't know. So a doubtful reading is another concept that we have. And what do you understand by doubtful reading? If we say there is a doubtful reading, what do you understand? Does it mean that the reader has a doubt when reading that? Like if I read a Pali sentence and it's very difficult, then I say, well, this is doubtful. This is a doubtful reading. Or what do you think he means by doubtful reading?
Regarding this sentence, it's difficult to find the subject of the final verb. I would say, because it's a parikkaya penti, it's a prayojaka.
Exactly.
It's a causative.
So what happens here is that if a doubtful reading, it can happen on the basis of just one manuscript or one edition. Suppose we have one book, or we have a manuscript. Do you know what I mean by a manuscript? Means a palm leaf text. Yeah, we are reading and we are just reading one, and we see a sentence that grammatically is problematic. It seems that some things are not completely according to the rule, and we don't know what happened, if that should be correct, or maybe the reading is actually, the reading is doubtful. Maybe there was a mistake in the copy. There was a mistake in the transmission of the text. This is more conspicuous, and it's easier to see when, instead of reading one edition or one manuscript, we compare different editions and different manuscripts. There are places that are not clear, and in one manuscript you will see it written in one way, in another manuscript you will see it written in a different way, and then you check one printed edition and it will be written in a different way. And these are what are called the doubtful readings. There's one very nice example of doubtful reading that extends to the commentaries also, because sometimes you say, well, let's check the commentary and see what was the reading that Buddhaghosa was reading at that time. But it's not so easy, and I'm going to give you an example, because since this is the philological pathway, there are more, but this one is one that I think it's in a very famous passage. And I remember seeing that when I was working at the Dhammachai Tipitaka project. We were doing the Digha Nikaya. And it's a very famous passage, but there is a very interesting textual problem. I think even in one second, I'm going to share the screen. It's just to clarify what do we mean by doubtful reading. Sometimes the doubtful reading is in the verb, sometimes in the... So here, I hope you can read the text. It is a very famous beginning of the Mahanidana Sutta. And you remember that sentence here. Etassa ananda dhammassa ananuboda appativeda evam ayam paja tanta kulaka jata kulagantika jata. But you have a variant reading, gulaguntika jata. And you have another variant reading, gunagantika jata. And then munja pabbaja bhuta apayam duggatim binipatam samsaram nati vattati. So the sentence is very famous, but there is this word here that is problematic. And then you will say, well, actually there are more readings. Here in the Burmese edition, there are only two. It says that the Sinhalese and PTS, they read gula instead of kula. And they don't read gantika, they read guntika. And jata is okay, jata is consistent. And then there's in the Siam version, we have guna, not gula or kula, we have guna, gantika, not guntika, but gantika, like in the Burmese, jata. Now some philologists or some scholars can say, well, let's check what Buddhaghosa says here and problem solved, right? So let's see what was the reading that Buddhaghosa was saying. But That's also an interesting. Let's see if we find it. Yeah. Here there are no variant readings. But see, this is the commentary. Of course, the Burmese edition takes this one. Kula Gantika. See that? Remember that in the previous reading in the Mula, we had only Kula, not Kula. Now we have Kula. Yeah. So already there is a variant between the Mula of the Burmese edition and at least in the online edition. And it says Kula Gantikam Vuchati Pesakarakan Jia Suttam. Kula Nama Sakunika. So that's a kind of verb. Tassa Kulava Koti Piyeke. So some, you see, Tassa, some say that it's not the verb, but this kind and then Yatahi Tadvayampi Akulam Agenava Agam Mulenava Mulam Samanetum Dukkaram Iti Purimanayena Eva Yojatamam. Okay. But here, if you check, for instance, the PTS, or if you compare different manuscripts and different editions of the Atakata, of the commentary, you will also see that there is no consistency with the reading of this word. And of course, then the translators, they have to translate. But depending on one thing, it's like, it's confused like a ball, like a gula, or it's confused like this kind of kula gantita, whatever that is. Kula means family, but kula is a kind of, it seems to be a kind of bird, but no one knows exactly. It's a difficult word. So in such cases, there are doubtful readings. We are not completely sure what is the best reading, and everyone will choose one. So you have to decide which one you prefer, which one makes more sense. Maybe sometimes you can see another passage somewhere else. But as I said, there's a problem that sometimes if we compare with another passage, that other passage will also have variant reading, the same variant reading and the same textual problem. So this is all the basic function of the nominative as the subject, as the subject agent. So subject means it's the grammatical subject. It's also the logical subject of the sentence. Yeah, is it clear so far? Is it okay?
Yeah.
Yes.
Great.
Okay.
Now we move to what about when the sentence is a passive sentence? That means the verb is passive. So what is the difference between an active verb and a passive verb? How would you define, without looking at any book, if you try to think, suppose we have to explain to someone what is the difference between a verb that is a passive or active. And by active, we say, I think your terminology is kattukaraka and passive is kammakaraka. Or you can also say kattari or kammani in the active or in the passive. Kattari is in the active voice, kammani is in the passive voice. So how do you explain in a simple way what is the difference between an active verb or a passive verb? This is a real problem because I'm having this problem right now. As you know, I sometimes I teach courses to Westerners, and you are probably teaching to Westerners, or you will teach eventually to Westerners. So when we move and we try to explain these things, they are very easy for us. We know that the deity, that's a passive. We call it passive. That's kammani. But how do you explain what does passive mean? What is the meaning of passive? What is the difference between active and passive? You can use English examples. Like I'm writing a book, that is active. The book is written by me, that is passive. The book is being written by me, that is a passive sentence. And I'm writing a book, that is the active sentence. But conceptually, what is the difference?
In active voice, the action is done by the agent and subject. Okay. In the passive voice, action is done by the object.
Very good. So very good. Yeah. So Another way that you will find it expressed that in the active, the action is done by the subject, and in the passive, the action is suffered by the subject. For instance, if I say that I destroy, let's say, sorry about the example, but I destroy the book, that's active. And I is the subject of the sentence, and the book is the object, so I destroy the book. I'm doing the action. The action is done by the subject. But if I say the book is destroyed by me, so being destroyed is not an action that is done, is a kind of action that is suffered. So the consequences of that action are suffered by the subject of the sentence. And actually that's the meaning of passive. Passive, the meaning of why we use the term passive in English, that comes from Latin, and originally it comes from the Greek concept, but that was translated into Latin and then into French and then into English. So you know that English words are not original. They usually come from French, and French words are not originally. They usually come from Latin, and Latin words are not original. They usually are translations from the Greek, and some Greek words are not originally. Sometimes are translations from some other. But this is the story of words, and that's why sometimes they don't make much sense. So why passive means is something that happens to them. In the passive sentence, there's something that happens to the subject. For instance, the book is destroyed by me. The book is there, just there. The book is doing nothing, but there's someone else that, boom, smashes the book. So the book is just there suffering this action. Yeah, it's passive. It's not active. It's not doing anything. It's just suffering the action. And who is doing something in the passive sentence is an agent. There's also an agent, but that agent is not the grammatical subject. It's not the grammatical subject of the sentence. In Pali, we express that agent with the instrumental case or the tatiya vibhatti. And in that case, we say that this is tatiya vibhatti in the sense of katta. The function, the karaka is katta. But the subject, the grammatical subject, like dhammo cha desiyati, the doctrine too is preached. So dhammo desiyati, the doctrine is taught or is preached. Here dhammo is the subject, is the passive subject. The patient subject is patient. Sometimes you will see that concept, the patient subject. But it's still the logical object. That is what is being taught. Yeah. But in general, I think the Bhikkhu Siddhartha's definition is I think it's quite clear. Like in the active, the subject represents the agent. In the passive, the subject represents the object. That's basically what you meant, right? Venerable Siddhartha? That was basically the point, I think. And I think that's correct, and that's a good understanding. So the nominative, if the sentence is active, the nominative will express the katta. If the sentence is a passive, the nominative will express kamma. Yeah? The logical object, that is kamma. It's the grammatical subject, but it's the logical object. That is the difference between what is grammatical and what is logical. Logical means in reality. In reality, the book is destroyed by me. The book is the object of the action of destroying. Dhammo desiyati, the Dhamma is the object of the action of teaching. Evarupam bhojanam diyati, such food is given. Food such as this is given. Sorry about the typo. Given. Or another one, asutava putujjano na parimucchati. The unlearned worldling is not released. Is not released. So the asutava putujjano here is the subject of the sentence, but it's the logical object. So no one is releasing him, or the mind is not releasing him, or the suffering is not releasing him, something like this. Yeah. So this is with passive verbs. Now, the nominative in passive sentence, because it expresses the kamma, then it can also express the goal or the way when the verbs are verbs of motion. And verbs of motion means verbs that mean to go, to enter, to move, to approach. I don't know, you name it. Any verb that means moving somewhere, that is a verb of motion. Verb of motion. So you know that in the active voice, verbs of motion, they can take an accusative of goal or way. Like if I say, aham gamam gacchami, yeah, aham gamam gacchami. Then you can say, okay, how can you say gamam in the accusative, the dutiya vibhakti? Gamam, is that the object? Is that the kamma of gacchami? In a way, yeah. In a way, it's the kamma, because it's the goal in this case. It's the object of my movement, yeah. So it's the kind of object or objective or the destination, the final point of my movement. Something like this. One example: Aranyakena avuso bhikkhuna nati kalena gamo pavisitabbo. And here the example is gamo pavisitabbo. Very good example. Gamo, nominative. Pavisitabbo is a future passive participle. Pavisitabbo should be entered. So the village should be entered. So if we would move that into the active, we would say that bhikkhu gamam pavisati or pavisissati. But if we use it in the passive, is bhikkhuna gamo pavisitabbo. By the bhikkhu, the village should be entered or will be entered. Yeah. So this is again a transposition of what in the active sentence is an accusative, in the passive sentence is a nominative. What in the active sentence is a nominative, in the passive sentence is, if the active is transitive, then in the passive sentence it will be instrumental. So here we have bhikkhuna in the instrumental, that is tatiya vibhakti, expressing the katta. Mango kome gantapo. The path should be gone, literally, by me. This is something that in English we cannot translate. See that here this translation is quite literal. The road should be walked by me. Maybe in English it sounds a little bit better than in other European languages. I'm not so sure. But my point is, I don't know if when in Pali we say maggo me gantabo, does it sound as strange as in English, the road should be walked by me? I think in Pali, maggo me gantabo sounds relatively natural, but in English, the road should be walked by me. It doesn't sound very natural. What sounds natural in English is to use the active voice, something like I should walk the path, something like this. I should walk the path. Instead, the path should be walked by me.
I have an idea for this translation.
Yeah.
Shall we give path should be practiced by me?
Exactly. That is also a perfect translation, because to go means to follow. It should be followed by me, or it should be practiced. My question here, and this is a question that, for instance, in Spanish translations we have all the time, and there is a division of opinions. Sorry, I'm drinking a lot of water because it's just very hot. This summer here is very hot, so I'm talking all the time. So there, in Pali or in Indian languages, and I'm not so sure, maybe also in Sinhalese, the passive construction is very common. It's not so uncommon. There are many sentences that are expressed in the passive, and it's perfectly normal, and it sounds very natural in the language. In English, it depends on what type of English. In academic English, yeah, there is a lot of passive sentences. But in normal day-to-day English, the passive is not as common as the active. The natural way of expressing something is in the active. And in other European languages, like for instance, in my case, in Spanish, we also express things in the active, preferably not in the passive voice. Although we can also say the same thing in the passive voice. There is an option. We can also say the path should be gone by me, or should be practiced by me, or I should practice the path, or I should walk the path. Both are possible. So some translators, they say that even if it doesn't sound totally natural in Spanish, for instance, or in English, we have to preserve the passive of the original, because the passive is usually a way of speaking that is more impersonal. It's more impersonal. Things happen. It's not that someone is doing something. So in this way, the idea of anatta is more visible. Yeah. it's something happened instead of I'm doing something. Because the idea of the I or the agent, who is the atta, who is the someone, some puggala, it's kind of dissolves into the action taking place. As Buddhaghosa says, there is no agent doing something, there is just an action taking place. So the passive voice would represent this concept in a better way. But that is a matter of taste. And in any case, what is important here is that sometimes you will see a nominative in the passive sentence, and that stands for an object that we will call the kamma. But in this case, it's this kamma that represents the goal all the way. In the same way that in the active we can say gamam gacchami, in the passive we can say gamo gantabo, something like this. Yeah, or gamo gato. Gamo gato is some constructions are more frequent than the other. See that these two examples are done with the future passive participle. But yeah, gamo gato in principle should also be accepted. The village is gone to. The village is gone to. Yeah, he translates should be entered. So pavisitabo. Anyway, now we have another example of the nominative, that is the infinitive, tumanta plus arhati, deserves, sukara, easy, sakka, is also with these expressions. So see the example, na arahati ayasma ambatto avisajjitum. The venerable ambatta does not deserve to be accused. So here ambatta is actually the subject of arahati. No, sorry, arahati, it's not. Yeah, so how do you analyze this? So narahati ayasma ambatto avisajjitum. He doesn't deserve to be accused, avisajjitum. How do you take this nominative here? To me, it's another example of the same. It's a nominative of the subject of the active sentence, but see that in this case there is an tumanta, avisajjitum, with arahati. Another example, naidam sukaram agaram ajavastata brahmacharyam. This is higher life. It's not easy to be practiced by one living at home. Naidam sukaram agaram ajavastata brahmacharyam. Yeah, so here, what is sukaram is the brahmacharyam, that is not sukaram. So this brahmacharya is not. Here again, what I would say that there is a verb hoti that is elliptic. I'm not so sure about this example. So these examples here, and then nayam sukaro jivitavoropetum with an infinitive. So the infinitive is the subject of the sentence. So na ayam jivitavoropetum sukaro hoti. We have to understand hoti. See that in English we are using is. That means hoti. So, okay, it's 11:30 here. Shall we take a break and then read a little bit of sutta? What do you think?
Sure.
Yeah, we didn't go very far today. Next day we're going to complete. Next day we'll go a little bit fast and we will jump some things. You are expected to keep reading and to complete the nominative and the accusative by next week. Yeah, is that okay?
Okay.
That means we'll have to go up to page. Let me show you. So now we were in nominative case. Okay, until here. You have to read until page 107 for next week. Yeah? I hope that you have already been reading, so maybe some of you already reached here. And please keep taking your own notes, your own summaries. It's very important to have to use the examples. And sometimes, if you disagree, if you don't like or you think that it's not totally correct, the interpretation of Vijayasekara, the point is not that he is right or he is wrong. The point is there are different ways in which we can analyze a sentence. And sometimes two different approaches are possible, but we have to choose one. Like in this last one that we saw, like infinitive or arhati, avisajjitum or something like this, I would take this one as a general nominative that is the subject, and that's it. So Sariputto, Arahati, whatever. But that's up to you. So if you disagree sometimes with the book and you find other sources, you are totally encouraged to find other interpretations in Burmese materials, English materials, Sinhalese materials, Thai, whatever it is, wherever you can find other information, you can do that. But we are just taking Vijay Sekara's book as our manual, our basic book. From this one, we depart. Yeah, this is our basis here. It's in English. It's a good synthesis, so we are using this one. And if we disagree, we can change. Now, so we are going to take a 10-minute break, and when we come back, we are going to start reading the Brahmajala Sutta. For that, I will ask some of you to read. Yeah. You read and translate, and we will be commenting on certain words. Okay. So see you in 10 minutes. See you now. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Hello, everyone. Again, welcome back. Can you see the screen, the shared screen?
Yes, yeah.
Yeah. Do you know this thing? Do you know this website?
Yes, we know.
Everyone?
Yeah.
Have you used the digital bio reader? It's a very useful website where you can, I don't know how to get out from this. Anyway, so shall we start reading the sutta? We'll just, as an example, we'll use the Brahmajala Suttam of the Digha Nikaya. And I don't know if anyone would like to start. Today we have seen the nominative, so we will focus on nominatives. Anyone would like to start? Maybe Matanda So?
Yes.
Great. You can start from Ivam Mesutam.
Evam Mesutam Ekam Samayam Bhagava Andaraja Rajakaham Andaraja Nalamdam Adana Magabdi Pano Hoti Mahata Bhikkhu Sangena Sating Panta Matehi Bhikkhu Satehi Subhiyobi Ko Paribhaja Ko Andaraja Radhakaham Andaraja Nalandam Adana Magabdi Pano Hoti Satim Andevasina Brahmadatina Manavina Tantra Suttam Subhiyo Paribhajako Aneka Pariyayena Buddhasa Avanam Bhasati Dhammasa Avanam Bhasati Sanghasa Avanam Bhasati Subhiyasa Panna Paribhajakasa Andevasi Brahmadato Manavo Aneka Pariyayena Buddhasa Vanam Bhasati Dhammasa Vanam Bhasati Sanghasa Vanam Bhasati Idihate Ubo Adriyantevasi Anyamanyasa Ujuvi Pajani Gavada Bhagavandam Patito Anubandha Hoti Bhikkhu Sanghanta.
Right. So here, I understand that we all know we all understand the sutta. If there are things that are strange or that are difficult, you can highlight them and say, could you explain this, or what do you think about this? Feel free to do so. We are at MA level. MA level, sometimes it looks a little bit like a primary school, but it shouldn't be like a primary school. The MA means we are all grown-ups. We are just meeting and discussing something. And also, I know that your level of Pali is very high. So here, if you go to the point, that is fine. You can just select the nominatives that we find in this paragraph and comment on them. Is it a normal nominative? Is it the subject of a sentence? What do you think? So maybe you can start with Bhagava and then move on, identifying all the nominatives that you find here.
Yes. Here, Bhagava is nominative, and superior ko paribhasako.
What could you say about this nominative? If we see Bhagava is the nominative of which verb? Because if we want to know the function of the nominative, now at least we know two possible functions. Basically two. It can be the subject of the active sentence, or it can be the subject of the passive sentence, or sometimes it's the subject of a verb that we call a copula, or like the verb to be, hoti, like in this case. And then if it's with the verb hoti, we will usually find another nominative that is agreeing. Yeah. So that's another nominative that goes with Bhagava through the verb hoti. So this verb hoti connects, this is that. So A is B. Bhagava is going on the way, something like this. So they are both in the nominative. And the second nominative that is telling us the quality, then we call it, in English, we call it the attribute. In Pali, you could call it the visesana, or it's a qualification of the first nominative. Something is something else. So we predicate something of something. We say that something is something else. So in this case, we are also using the nominative, and you can see that this Bhagava goes with Adana Maga Patipano. Yes. Great. So the verb here is
hoti.
It's hoti. The verb to be is not active or passive. Active or passive is something that we need to have a transitivity. We need to have an object to call it active or passive. Someone doing something to the object, or someone creating an object or perceiving an object. If it's not that case, then this verb is just, it expresses existence or being. As you know, it's bhu or hu means sattayam, that means to be. So in that case, it's not passive or active, it's just being. Yeah, it's power.
Yes.
Great. What else? What do you find? Apart from that, you saw supio paribhajako, that is another nominative. So what do you think about this nominative? What kind of nominative is this?
It is also subject of hoti. And in this sentence also there is another nominative, Atanamaka Patipano. It is also the qualification of superior paribhasako.
Right. What else? Next sentence.
In next sentence, the superior paribhasako is nominative, and it is the subject of pasati.
Right. So here we have a different thing, because this subject, what kind of karaka is this? Is it kata or kamma?
It is also kata.
It's kata, okay.
Yes. It is active sentence.
Right.
Yes. And in another sentence, Andevasi Brahmadato Manavo. And it is also nominative, and it is the subject of pasati.
Right. So we have this one here, and then in the next one, we have also the verb basati elsewhere. It's the same. And in the last one, iti ha te ubho Acharyantevasi, Anyamanyasa, Uju Vipachanika Vada, Bhagavantam Pitito Pitito Anumanda Honti, Vikusangancha.
Yes. In this sentence, Ubato Acharyantevasi is subject and Hoti is the verb.
Right.
And this is plural form.
And what is the attribute? So it's Acharyantevasi, Honti, and Honti what? What is the nominative that goes with?
Anubandha Honti.
Anubandha Honti. Great. So we have said that we said before that the verb hoti, it doesn't take an accusative because it's not a transitive verb. But what about Bhagavantam and what about Bhikkhu Sangam? It's Bhikkhu Sangam cha, Bhikkhu Sangam. This is accusative and Bhagavantam is also accusative. What do we do with this accusative? What is this?
Patito. Patito.
Pitito, that is an ablative. It's a kind of adverb that means behind, something like
behind,
this. After. Yeah. So this also goes with anubandha or anubadda, depending on the reading. So they were following after, going after, that pitito means in the back, after. Yeah. And you take Bhagavantam pitito or Bhagavantam anubandha. Here we have a clue in anubandha that the preverb anu, it usually takes or requires or governs accusative. So if you see, for instance, bhavati is to be, right? Bhavati.
Yeah.
Puriso bhavati. But if I say puriso anubhavati, then I need an object. And maybe I say puriso katukam vedanam anubhavati. The man experiences a sharp sensation. So once we add anu to the verb, it usually requires an accusative. So in this case, the verb is a participle, but it is nevertheless a verb. It's a verbal form. So these two accusatives, Bhagavantam and Bhikkhu Sangam, they go with anubandha. It's like they follow the Bhagavan and they follow the community of monks. Yeah. So this accusative, it doesn't go with the main verb. It goes with the participle, with the anubandha participle or anubadda, which is it's a very common reading, anubadda or anubandha. You know that I don't know if you. Well, in this case, the N and the D are different, but how many people here can read the Sinhalese script, apart from Venerable Siddhartha, that I understand he can read his own language and his own script. But how about the other venerables? Can you read Sinhalese?
No.
No?
No.
No, nobody? Okay, if you don't say anything, it means nobody. How many of you have been to Sri Lanka? You can raise your hand. You never been to Sri Lanka?
Yes, never.
Never? Okay.
Yeah.
Because sometimes I have students who maybe they already did one MA in Sri Lanka, so I can say, how you were there in Sri Lanka, you didn't learn that. But in your case, I cannot blame you. You were never in Sri Lanka. But we are going to do something very interesting in this course. From next day, and please pay attention to this, from next day, means next Monday, we are not going to read the Brahmajala in Roman script. We will read it in Sinhalese script. Yeah? Okay? So you have 1 week to catch up. It's very easy. You just practice a little bit. You already have the text, yeah? You have the text in Burmese script. you have the Burmese script in one hand and the Sinhalese in the other hand. But I want you to read directly from the Sinhalese script. When we are reading the sentence in the classroom, I will share the PDF and it will be in the Sinhala script. And we all read the Sinhalese script. Okay? If you are Pali scholars, you should know Pali grammar, but you should also know Pali scripts. In Sanskrit, there are many scripts actually. You are learning Sanskrit and you are learning the Devanagari script, right? That kind of script like this, the Devanagari. If you go to Delhi, to New Delhi, you will see that many things are written in Devanagari. If you go to Mumbai, many things are written. But if you go to Kerala, or if you go to Chennai, or if you go to Bangalore, you don't see Devanagari. Sometimes you see Devanagari, but you see other scripts. So in different regions in India, they have different scripts. They also write Sanskrit differently. In Tibet, for instance, they write Sanskrit in Tibetan script. In Myanmar, you write Sanskrit in Myanmar script. You can write Sanskrit in Myanmar script. You can write Pali in Myanmar script. You can write Sanskrit and Pali also in Thai script. You can write Sanskrit and Pali in Sinhala script. So one thing is the language, another thing is the script. But our MA program is not called the grammatical pathway. It's called the philological pathway. So the philology includes grammar, but it also includes textual criticism. So if you are good Pali scholars, you should be able to consult the Sinhalese edition. Yeah, we should not be self-centered or chauvinistic. If I'm from this country, suppose I'm from Europe, I just read the PTS. I don't read the Burmese script. I don't read the Sinhala. I read the Roman because that's my script. Here we have Venerable Siddhartha, who he can even speak and understand Burmese language, let alone the Burmese script. So this is very good, and it's a kind of iddhi. It's a kind of superpower that you gain when you learn a different script. So we will also practice with the Thai script. But now in this, let's take this opportunity in this course to practice with the Sinhalese script. It's difficult for 1 week, 2 weeks. After that, it's very easy. We get used to this. And don't worry, you can have the other one with you. Anyway, so that was just an idea that occurred to me, because we can practice several things at the same time. We can practice grammar, we can practice script, and we can practice many other things. Let's move on. Let's move on to the second paragraph. Ma Tandaso, would you like to continue? Atako Bhagawa.
Yes. Atako Bhagawa Ambalati Kaya Raja Karaki Ikarati Vasam Upakachi Satim Bikusankina Subi Upi Ko Paribhajako Ambalati Kayam Raja Karaki Ikarati Vasam Upakachi Andivasina Brahmadatina Manavina Tatrabi Sudam Subiyo Paribhajako Aneka Priyayena Buddhasa Avanam Vasati Dhammasa Avanam Vasati Sanghasa Avanam Vasati Supiyasa Pana Paribhajagasa Andivasi Brahmadado Manavu Aneka Priyayena Buddhasa Vanam Vasati Dhammasa Vanam Vasati Sanghasa Vanam Vasati Itihade Ubo Ajri Andivasi Anyamanyasa Ujuvi Patani Gavada Viharanti.
So this one is it's more interesting. We are going to skip the ones that are the same one. The ones with Vasati, you can skip those because it's the same thing. But at the beginning, you have Upagachi, that is the verb. So you have Bhagawa Upagachi. What do you do with that Bhagawa?
Bhagawa Upagachi. This is also accusative subject of Upagachi.
So Bhagawa is the nominative subject of Upagachi.
Yes, nominative subject. Yes.
And how do you understand this sentence? It's Bhagava Upagachi, that is what Upagachi means to reach, something like this, right? To go near.
Yes, to go near. It is past tense, huh?
Right? It's the past tense or the aorist. And what is the object of Upagachi? Does it have an object? It's a verb of movement. Remember that we call them verbs of motion or the verb of movement. So here the basic structure is Bhagava Upagachi, sometimes Upaganchi, depends on the reading. So the Bhagavan, he reached, and usually we reach one place or we reach somewhere. So do you find an object here of the verb or not?
Ambalatikaya.
Are you sure? So what is the
No.
Here the word is if you click on the word, it will say it's Ambalatika. That is a royal park, but the point here is it's Ambalatika. So Ambalatikayam is a locative singular. Rajagarake, that is also locative singular.
Yes. Here accusative is Ekarativasam.
Yeah. So Ekarativasam, it's a kind of the living for one night. So you reach the living for. So it's a kind of, I don't know, it's a kind of very idiomatic construction in Pali. Because it's not that he reaches specifically the place. So instead of saying he reached the Rajagaraka in order to spend one night, with what we see is he reached the spending on one night in the Rajagaraka, in the royal house or hostel, something like this. And then we have Saddin Bhikkhu along with the community of monks. So I don't know, this sentence is quite interesting. Logically at least, because it's Upagachi, means to reach. But here we have this accusative, this basam.
Yes.
As you can see in this basic dictionary, it means the living, the sojourn, the habitation. I don't know how other classmates, what do others think? Venerable Siddhartha, Venerable Kemachara, Venerable Karunika, Venerable Javana, Venerable Teja. What do you think is Ekarativasam here? Is this the Kamma? Or would that be a kind of adverb? How do you take this sentence? So in other words, I will ask the question differently. The verb upagachi, is it sakammaka or akammaka?
I would say it's like some adverbial sense.
So
if it would be as object, so we have to say gamam upagachi like this, but ekarativasam is just like living.
Exactly. So in this case, even though it's an accusative, it's still strange to take it as an object of the. It seems that in the case of upagachi, like because we have the preverb upa in this case, and upa can go with the locative in the same way that we have yena bhagava tena upasankami. And here you could say, well, upasankami, it goes with the instrumental, but that's not theoretically correct because that instrumental is equal to a locative. So that's an instrumental, yena tena, that means yatta tatta. So it's tatta upasankami, and here will be also tatta upagachi. So what we have here is basically a verb that doesn't take an object. And this ekarativasam, which is, it's a kind of object, but it works as an adverb. This is for the duration of one night, and also it works well with something that we will see later. You know that sometimes the accusative, it can express the adverb of time, and that should usually be the duration of time. So it should be a continuous duration of time, and that here it works well because it's for the whole night, from the beginning of the end of the night, through the night. or for one night continuously. So then in English, what we would translate is that he reached the royal house in that Ambalatika for the living of one night or something like this, right? But the verb theoretically or logically, it should be considered here as intransitive. It doesn't take an object. Yeah, this upa indicates position, so it goes with the locative. Great. That's not the nominative, so don't worry. We were just looking at the nominatives, but this one was interesting because for us, the understanding of the nominative, it's also very much dependent on the verb, and we should know whether the verb is transitive or intransitive. And sometimes it's not totally clear. Even in this sentence, it's almost as if this accusative is also working as a kind of object, but in the sense it is an adverb. It's for the duration of one night. It's an adverb of time. Great. The next sentence is the same, and then we have the avannam basati and vannam bhasati, and the last one iti hate ubo acharyante vasi nyamanyasha uju vipachani gavada viharanti. This one is interesting. So what do you do with the nominative ubo acharyantevasi here?
Ubo acharyantevasi. And this is also subject of viharanti.
Right.
And also in this sentence, uju vipachani vada is also the subject of viharanti. It is the qualification of acharyantevasi.
Right. This is perfect. So before, we saw that we had one nominative and then another nominative, which was the qualification of the previous one. But the verb was the verb hoti, to be. It can be hoti, it can be bhavati, it can be patu bhavati, some verb to be or to be visible, to be manifest, to appear, something like that. So then we have the nominative, subject, and then we have the attribute. The attribute is literally the quality, the guna, or the visesana of that nominative. Yeah. In this case, however, the verb is viharanti. It's not honti. So this verb indicates an action, and in this case, we have to say whether this action is transitive or intransitive. Is it sakammaka or akammaka? What do you think?
Akammaka.
It's akammaka, so it's intransitive. Now, here it basically means they both live, or we translated in the past because they used to stay, they stayed, or they stay, they dwell. And then the second nominative, it indicates something about this acharyantevasi, that is certainly, it is also a kind of attribute, fine, but it is also telling us how they live. So it is also referred to the verb. So it's telling us how they are. So that would be with the verb to be, but it's also telling us how they are doing this action. They live in this way. Uju vipachani gavada, discussing with one another, basically. They live quarreling with one another. Anyamanyasa uju vipachani gavada. That means that's how they live. So this type of nominative that is giving us the information that could mean something like how they are doing, in which manner or in which state they are doing the action, the intransitive action that they are doing, or sometimes the transitive action that they are doing. This is called the predicative nominative. It's a predicative. Because in a way it's predicating something about them. So it's those teacher and student or pupil, they were dwelling, fighting with one another or discussing with one another. That's how they were dwelling. That's the idea. So the difference would be basically, if you see the verb hoti, then the other nominative, we will call that the attribute. But if it's not with the verb hoti, it's generally this predicative nominative will appear before the verb. So it will be continuous. Ute, ubo, achariyante vasi, uju vipachyanika vada. It goes continuous, and this second nominative, that is a kind of predicative nominative. Yeah. Yes.
I have one more thing to add.
Sure.
Normally, in Nisaya we translate as uju vipachyanika vada hutva viharanti.
Sorry, again, Mate, I missed the key word.
Normally we translate
hutva. Yeah. So that's the idea. What happens here is that when we introduce the hutva, what we are doing is saying this is actually an attribute. So it's certainly a being like this, but the introducing the hutva also makes this hutva, this absolutive, in a way, you know that the absolutive originally is an instrumental. Did you know that? It seems that historically, the ending in tua, it seems to be a historical instrumental of the name of the action, the name of the verb, in the same way that the infinitive ending in tum, it's the accusative, or the neuter, it's a neuter nominative or accusative. So if you have, for instance, I don't know, babitum, something like this, like that would be hotum. So from a stem like babitu or hotu, you would have an instrumental hutwa or babitwa. So the ending tua would be the instrumental of a form ending in tu. That is historically. But my point here is that the absolutive, it generally indicates an action that takes place before the main verb. Sometimes it's before, but it's something that is affecting the main verb. It's something that it's qualifying the noun. It's also qualifying the verb. That's my point. So that's the difference between achariyante vasi, uju vipachyanika vada honti, but then we have to say still uju vipachyanika vada cha viharanti. They are uju vipachyanika vada and they live as being uju vipachyanika. So that would be the difference between the predicative and the attribute. So the attribute is when the main verb is already hoti. But when you have to insert the hutwa, that is what we call a predicative nominative. Yeah. So if you are following the Nisaya, that is going to be an indication that in English we call that type of nominative a predicative. Yeah. Instead of attribute. Yeah. We will see that I think next week because it's one of the forms that appear next. But yeah. Shall we read on? Atako Sambahulanam Bhikkhu. I don't know if someone else would like to read. And Matandaso. Yeah. Thank you very much, Matandaso, for your reading.
Atako Sambahulanam Bhikkhu Pratya Pachuda Samayang Pachuttitanam Mandala Male Tannisinnanam Sannipatitanam Ayang Sankhya Dhammo Udapadi Accharyang also Abhutang also Yavanchidan Tena Bhagavata Janata Pasata Arahata Samma Sambuddhena Sattanam Nanadhimuttikata Suppati Vidita Ayanhi Suppiyo Paribhajako Aneka Pariyayena Buddhassa Avannam Bhasati Dhammassa Avannam Bhasati Sanghassa Avannam Bhasati Suppiyasapana Paribhajakassa Ante Vasi Brahma Datto Manavo Aneka Pariyayena Buddhassa Vannam Bhasati Dhammassa Vannam Bhasati Sanghassa Vannam Bhasati Itihame Ubho Achariyante Vasi Anyamanyassa Ujuvipachyanika Vada Bhagavantam Pittito Anubandha Honti Bhikkhu Sanganchati.
Perfect. Here, so feel free, Bhante, to skip all the things that we have already seen, like the Vannam Bhasati, this one you can skip, and the last one, Anubandha Honti. But you can comment on the non-seen ones, the new ones, like the first Udapadi.
Ayang Sankhya Dhammo Udapadi. Ayang Sankhya Dhammo, that's subject of the Udapadi.
Right, so what kind of subject is this? I mean, it's a very simple question, but is the verb transitive or intransitive?
Udapadi, it's root. It should be intransitive.
It's intransitive. Actually, this is a very interesting case because upajjati, like sampajjati, and these verbs, they belong to the third class. And many of the verbs in the third class are intransitive. But if you look at them historically, or the pachaya that we use in the third class is the same pachaya that we use for the passive, that is ya. So upajjati literally means utpadyati, right? So we use the ya. We don't see that in the aorist udapadi, because that's its form in a different way. But when we form the present tense of upajjati, we have utpadyati. In Sanskrit, you would have actually utpadyate, and that would be taken as a kind of middle or passive voice, uppadyate. But in Pali, it's upajjati, ending in the short e, not upajjate. In any case, it's an intransitive, but these verbs of the third class, they have a kind of relation with this passive voice that is a kind of impersonal thing. So to arise, to appear. Anyway, so this ayam sankhya dhammo udapadi. So this is the subject of an intransitive verb, and that's it. This verb means simply to appear. It appears, and there is no. It cannot make a passive construction. So this is an active sentence in the intransitive verb, and that's it. Yeah, no problem.
Accharyam also, abhutam also. It's not a sentence actually. It's just giving the expression.
So how would you understand this kind of expression or exclamations? In that can apply to Pali. It can also apply to other languages. Like for instance, if suppose we are speaking in English, and someone calls me and say, "Hey, today finally I can come to your class," and then I will say, "Great, fantastic." That's it. I just say, "Great, fantastic. Please come." So what do we do with this great, fantastic? Is this just an exclamation? It's like, okay, great. It doesn't belong to any sentence. Or am I saying actually, this is great. This is fantastic. Please come to my class, or please come to my house, or whatever. So here with acharyam also, abhutam also, yavan chidam. So in a way, what is acharyam and what is abhutam is this idam. Idam acharyam hoti, idam abhutam hoti, sayat idam, or namely that yavan chidam, this is a kind of expression like, namely that tena bhagavata janata passata arahata samma sambuddhena sattanam nanadi mutikata supatividita. So this thing, idam is this thing, the nanadi mutikata supatividita. So this thing is amazing. How? So yavan, how well understood or well something realized is this different, the fact that there is a different inclinations in many different beings. So how this has been understood by the Buddha, this thing, idam, is acharyam and abhutam. Yeah, so this is a kind of complicated sentence because idam is clearly nominative, idam, and acharyam and abhutam, that technically should be the attribute, and we don't have the verb hoti or honti or something, any verb that means to be. But do you think that we should expect that verb to be there? So it is, in English, usually the translators will add the verb hoti. It is amazing, it is wonderful, namely, oh friend, namely, to what extent or how far or how much this, the idam goes with acharyam. So this is wonderful, this is fantastic or incredible, namely, how much the different dispositions of beings has been understood by the Buddha. So there are two blocks. This is something is fantastic, and then this idam is kind of glossed with all this sentence. Nanadi mutikata supati. So this is just a pronoun, and this here we have a noun in the feminine. This could be also considered the case of gender vipallasa. It's not really vipallasa, it's just the neuter is taking like this thing, namely the different inclination. But actually the idam incorporates the yavam. So as you were saying, Bante, this sentence is complicated in terms of syntax, but we should include acharyam and abhutam with the idam. And the yavan technically is the yava or yavat, or here it's the yavan due to the sandhi. It really goes with suppavidita. Is to what extent it has been properly or very well understood. Something has been very well understood by the Buddha. So we have the first idam that seems to be the subject of the verb hoti. So idam acharyam hoti, idam abhutam hoti. Yavam, so to what extent? Nana dimuttikata suppavidita. And nana dimuttikata suppavidita, this is also a nominative. Right? So this nana dimuttikata, what kind of nominative is this?
Actually, this seems this passive voice sentence.
Great.
Arhata samma sambuddhen is subject.
Yeah, maybe we can call it the agent from now on to distinguish subject from agent. So we will call the subject the grammatical subject. So the one which agrees with the verb. Here the verb is suppavidita. It's the participle. The word which agrees with the verb, the participle suppavidita, is nana dimuttikata. So technically this is the subject. It's a nominative subject, but as a karaka, it's a kamma karaka because it's a passive sentence. So the sammasambuddhena or bhagavata, that we will call it the agent. And when we say the word agent in English, that stands for the word katta in Pali. Yeah. So we can just restrict the concept of agent when what we want to say is katta. Is that okay? And then we can call the subject just the subject, the grammatical subject of the sentence. Yeah. Not to refer to any karaka. In this way, we don't mix one thing with the other. This is a problem of English. It's not a problem of Pali or a problem of your understanding. Your understanding is perfectly correct. But we need to try to find a way, not just to translate the text, but also to translate, the technical vocabulary that we are using. Because in English, things sometimes become confused. And I don't know what you feel about that, but that's, in my experience, trying to teach Pali to, American students, for instance, it's very difficult because the first thing is that they are not familiar with grammatical terms in English, even in English. Some of them, they don't know what is the subject of the sentence in English. And that happens because in many cases, they don't study other languages or maybe there is not that tradition. At least they don't study English in this way. Many people. So first thing is to define what is the subject, and then we have to define how to call the terms, the characters in Pali, and how do we translate them into English. So then the katta, usually we translate it as agent, and so when we say agent, that means the katta. The katta can be a nominative. It can also be an instrumental. Yeah. So anyway, your understanding is correct. So I don't know if there is anything else in the paragraph that deserves comment, Bante?
No special new things other than them, I feel.
Great. So shall we move to the next one? We can read a little bit before concluding.
Sure. Atako bhagava tesam bhikkунං imang sankhya dhammang viditva yena mandala malo tenupasankami upasankamitva panyatte asane nisidi nisajjako bhagava bhikkhu amantesi khayanutta bhikkave etarahi kathaya sannisinna sannipatita kachapanavo antarakata vippakatati evam muttete bhikkhu bhagavantam etadavochum ida bhante ammagang rattiya pacchuta samayang pachuttitanam mandala male sannisinanam sannipatitanam ayam sankhya dhammo udapadi.
We can do until here, Bante, if that is okay.
Viditva, yena mandala tendukanga. Then Tenupasankami, subject of the Tenupasankami, bhikkhu. Bhagava.
Right?
Bhagava. Also, Bhagava is the subject of Viditva.
So in this case, we have the rule is followed. So Viditva is the absolutive, and it's the same subject as Upasankami and Viditva. They both have Bhagava. And then if we continue, we have another absolutive, Upasankamitva. Here we don't see the subject, so it means it's still the same, right?
Yes. Elliptic. No, it's elliptic.
Yeah, in this case, I think it is elliptic, but Vijayasekara includes this kind of sequences as one type of, the subject of the absolutives and the main verb being the same. So what you would have here, the difference between this and an elliptic subject, what would that be? Because in a way this is elliptic, in a way there is a stop. After the main verb there should be a stop. But maybe if we take it only here, there is no ellipsis because Bhagava is here. What his point is that somehow in these types of sequences with then Upasankamitva, it's as if the sentence would go from Atako Bhagava until Amantesi. And you can see that in Amantesi the subject is again stated, Bhagava. So sorry, until Nisidi, Atako Bhagava, and then Bhagava, Viditva, Upasankami, Upasankamitva, Nisidi. So I agree with you that in the second part of the sentence that seems to be an elliptic nominative, but yeah, it's still because it's an absolutive. We still have to look at the main verb, which is Nisidi, and Nisidi is a third person singular. We have to find a nominative singular, and we have Bhagava. Great. So Nisajjako Bhagava Bhikkhu Amantesi. How about that? Any difference?
No.
No difference here?
Subject, no difference.
Great. No problem.
Next sentence is a little bit complicated. Let's try.
Yeah.
Kayanutta bhikkave etarai kathaya sannisinna sannipatita. Kathaya with that speech or sannisinna sannipatita. There should be a agent. Should be added. By whom?
Right. So see that here the passive is sannisinna is the passive of sitting, and sannipatita is the passive of sannipajjati. Now both nisidati and usually the root pad sannipajjati in the active they are intransitive, right? Like uppajjati. So when we turn an intransitive verb into the passive, we can make the passive, but because in the active there is no object because the verb is intransitive, then in the passive it seems that the subject here, the grammatical subject is still the subject. Like here is sannisinna, that means tumhe, right? We don't have the tumhe. It's tumhe sannisinna sannipatita, like you all, O bhikkhus, you are sitting here together and gathered here together. And we don't have an agent because still the agent in this case, because the active sentence would be intransitive. So here the agent is still the grammatical subject, tumhe sannisinna. And we have an instrumental, this kataya, kaya kataya, that maybe, I don't know how you would take this instrumental, maybe it's a kind of instrumental of cause, of relation, like with regard to which talk, or because of which talk are you sitting here together? How do you think about this, Bante?
I think with karana.
Karana?
By which speech?
So here the thing is that with the karana, for instance, if I say that I cut the tree with a with an axe, right? So with the axe here, like in Pali would say like parasuna or something like this, that we will consider karana, because that's the instrument. That's what I use, what is necessary for the action of cutting, right? That will be the karana. That's why it's called the karana, that you need that to do the kiriya. The kiriya requires some karana that is done. So the kiriya is done with the karana. Here, the action of sitting, do you think that you require a conversation in order to sit or in order to meet? You know what I mean? Is it?
Yes, I got.
You could say that you are sitting with a cushion or a pillow. You could say that if you use that, but usually you say on a pillow, so that would be the okasa or adara. So when someone is sitting, usually we don't need a karana, because there is no instrument that helps us to sit. You know what I mean? So that would be the karana. Yes. But if you take karana, maybe you didn't say karana, you said karana. That means the reason. Was that my misunderstanding? Because karana with a short a, that means the instrument, but karana or hetu, that would mean the cause. I don't know which one you meant. Maybe I just mistaken that. I would take it as karana with a long a, karana. That means the reason why. What's the reason why you are meeting here? For which talk are you meeting here? On the reason of which, on the cause of which conversation you are sitting and gathering together. Maybe it's karana, but if it's a karana, that should be the kind of the means to accomplish the action. It should be directly related to the action. For instance, if you are cutting something with the scissors are the thing you're cutting. So you will express that as a